Hello world, it's John Pinto, your roving realtor, bon vivant, video blogger, podcaster here with Matt Tryon, a nutritionist who is going to enlighten us on all things biome. The name of this video blog is What the Gut. Yes, you heard that right. What the Gut, not what we would say in Brooklyn, which I shall not repeat. You can see I have my Shure video blogging mic shirt on. I love my Shure mics, S-H-U-R-E. And Matt, let's talk about breakfast. Let's talk about breakfast. So
that sounds awesome.
Let's talk about breakfast. So first of all, come clean. I'm going to use myself as a subject. I have an espresso grind control coffee maker. You know, you put the fresh beans in the hopper and you grind them, and so it's a very precarious trip. From my bed through the hallway, past the bathroom with a short visit to the bathroom, and then over to either my Breville grind control coffee maker or my Breville Nespresso maker, where I can get a single espresso, a double espresso, a cappuccino, a lungo, and in my Breville frother. Yes, I like Breville. I have a Breville kitchen. I use hemp milk. You know, I'm trying to go as plant-based as I can, which leaves out my preferred half and half, of which I have a little bit of a lactose intolerance, but not enough to make a difference. I tried oat milk, and my blood sugar spiked about 10% on oat milk. It's too sweet. And I found the hemp milk froths up well, and it's got pretty good protein, and it doesn't spike my blood sugar, and it doesn't really have any sugar content in it. And the night before, I start soaking my steel-cut oats. So I figure at least I'm going to get a jump start on plant-based complex carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. And I put my good friend Mark Mergen's farm fresh fruit jams with minimal sugar. He makes a jam out of Arceo's cherries. So it's cherries, whole cherries. So I'll throw maybe a tablespoon of the cherries in with a half a tablespoon of bee pollen, okay, and some walnuts, and steel-cut oats. I don't like instant oats or anything like that. And that is my breakfast, usually with 2 5-ounce cups of coffee with a half a cup of the frothed hemp milk every morning. I know you have not personally met my microbiome, have you? I haven't felt anything behind me. So
have you met your microbiome?
I doubt it. I think my microbiome is balking at me like every day, all day, especially in the morning. But you know, in my simple way of looking at things, I'm trying to get a plant-based start to the day. I'm trying to do complex carbohydrates, and you know, I'm not going for a lot of refined breads. I'm not going for sausages. So anyway, how do you think I'm doing? Do you think I could do better? How am I an example of the rest of the universe? What should we do? What should we not do?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Very loaded. Very loaded.
Let me ask you this. What were you doing before you decided you wanted to go plant-based? And what inspired you to go plant-based?
What I was doing before I went plant-based is I was 22 years old, stupid, and had no problems. I mean, as I got older, I had a stent put in. So, you got some hardening of the arteries, plaque buildup. I haven't hit diabetes yet, but my blood sugar has been gravitating above 6. So, I don't even remember what I used today. Maybe, whole grain waffles, maybe a dish of cereal, maybe, some plant-based sausages in my air fryer. But, I was never big on, 2 eggs and a couple of pieces of sausage and hash browns and all that. If I eat like that, I'm going to fall asleep by 9:30 a.m.
So it was more of a health thing that sort of
you know, when I went to see Sarah, the dietitian at Kaiser, she explained it in terms that made sense to me. She says, plant-based, no inflammation. Non-plant-based, inflammation. Inflammation leads to morbidity and death. I said, okay, plant-based, non-plant-based. I still like my sausages. I still like my sweetbreads. I like my bone marrow. I don't eat it every day. I don't eat it very often at all. But I figured it's not going to take much for me to at least stock my refrigerator, my freezer, my crisper, my pantry with plant-based, and, you know, be more conscious of eating more plant-based. So that's how I got there. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
You know, just to be clear, I mean, we hear that buzzword plant-based being thrown around a lot. And plant-based doesn't necessarily mean being vegetarian. It doesn't necessarily mean being vegan. Plant-based could be, you know, you have meat once a week, twice a week. Any percentage, you give a greater percentage of non-meat as a part of your diet. So plant-based, just for the listeners out there, I want to clarify that what it means, what plant-based really means.
Comes from plants.
Yeah, well, most of your diet will be from the ground up, not necessarily from animals. So what we do know though is that in fact, you know, plant-based diets have a more success in terms of being, you know, healing from other kinds of maladies or losing weight. And an example of this you probably know because of your family is the Mediterranean diet. I think we talked before about how the Mediterranean diet was something you kind of grew up on. And, you know, of all the diets out there, the Mediterranean diet is easily the most well-researched. And there's not a lot of, say, bad research on it in terms of it not having an effect or not having some sort of impact. In fact, of all the diets, we know that Atkins is really the king of weight loss, but you have a lot of issues that come along with that. Some people develop issues with blood markers for triglycerides and gout, inflammation, things like that. So there's some other things that come along with those kinds of diets. But here's something that most people don't know. The Mediterranean diet you can lose weight on also, almost not, the evidence shows that not as much as Atkins, but almost as much as Atkins, but in a much healthier and not as dramatic way. So really diet is, you know, figuring out what's optimal for us. I mean, if we're not looking at the microbiome, we're looking at basically our lifestyle. What is optimal for us? What makes us feel good? Now, when you look at your breakfast, do you ever look at your blood sugar at all afterwards?
No, very rarely. No, I go for my blood test every now and then. Check the blood test versus the last one 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months ago. And that's the extent. My wife tests every day, but I don't.
Does she have the same thing?
Well, she actually, you know, was diagnosed as diabetic, so she checks her blood sugar every day.
And how does she respond to that type of?
Oh, very good, very good, very good. As a matter of fact, since we started being at least more conscious of plant-based, her neuropathy has disappeared with no medication.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it went from 0 to 60 to 0, you know, in a couple of months. She just stopped having extreme discomfort in her feet.
I believe in a plant-based diet. I think that that's really great. Now, I think in one of our earlier episodes, we talked about how really the response to foods and diets in general is impacted by what our microbiome looks like.
Yeah.
So if we have certain bacterial species, it helps control the metabolic response and the glucose response to specific meals. That doesn't necessarily give us the the leverage to go eat whatever we want, whenever we want. But it gives us a sort of a gauge as to how much we should be eating and when we should be eating. That's one of the things I'm really interested in looking at, is really customizing diets that can tailor what your lifestyle is, or customizing lifestyles based on what you're eating, when you're eating it, how you're eating it, where you're eating it, and even sleep. It has all kinds of impacts on how we're digesting and metabolically responding to food. So for people who have had issues in the past, I think customizing the diet like you have and your wife has done makes a big important role, especially when you're keeping track of like your blood sugar and things like that. I think people need to start using those markers to sort of find out what kind of diet is really good for them. What's
now, is there some kind of technology out there where, in addition to your blood sugar, you can monitor your numbers on a regular basis every day at home without going into the lab and getting a blood test every day?
One of the things that I like using is a continuous glucose monitor. Now, I like those. Have you used those at all?
No, but I saw an ad yesterday. You stick something on your arm, and there's an app on the phone.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And it's really nice because it will... Now, this is different than actually pricking your finger, because when you prick your finger, it's looking at blood. It's sort of looking at the glucose in your blood.
Yeah.
The difference with the continuous glucose monitor, or the CGMs, is that it's taking the glucose from the interstitial fluid. So there's a bit of a delay in it. That's why you're going to get it's going to get a bit of a delayed, like 10, 15, even 20-minute delay on the response of food that you're eating when you're using your continuous glucose monitor. I like using that because glucose, your glucose response to food is a nice way of it looking at how your microbiome is responding to your food.
In real time.
In real time, exactly.
Oh.
In real time.
I like it.
And that's also nice because how you respond, when you said, and this is going back to what you said about I think you said it was oat milk? Oat milk.
Well, the oat milk made it spike.
Spike, right? So if you don't have as much, you probably might not get as much of a spike. So one of the things we can learn by this, and for example, I spike a lot on pomegranate. So you can tailor specific foods that you are spiking on to maybe it's like I can have maybe half as much, and you don't get the spike that you get with your normal. If you had 8 ounces, or maybe cut it down to 4 ounces instead, you don't get that spike. But it gives us an idea of the foods, not just the foods that we're responding to, but also like maybe the amounts as well.
Yeah. So let's go down the breakfast rabbit hole for a little while.
Okay.
I don't like Lipton tea and those commercial teas. I love going to Vital Tea Leaf on Grant Avenue in Chinatown in San Francisco, and he's wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling artisanal teas. Everything. Rooibos, chamomile, pu'er, white tea. 185 degrees, rinse it first, don't oversteep it. And the reason I like chamomile is it's the only tea that you can have where it doesn't oversteep. So, as far as tea goes for breakfast, is that all good?
Well, I guess that depends on
your microbiome.
I'm a data guy.
Your microbiome,
right? Whether something's bad or good is challenging to say. I mean, it depends on the person, and that's the thing that you got to pay attention to. This is why I encourage people to follow. Put some data to it, because the data doesn't lie. You could say, there's so many things that we can say they're subjective. I feel I have more energy. I have more of this. I have more of that.
So we have to go to testing.
To me, I'm a quantitative self kind of person.
Yeah.
I think getting data doesn't lie. It tells you what's actually going on. And that's what I do with my clients. when there's something about looking at numbers. When people look at your numbers, just like a banker will tell you, hey, your bank account, this is what your bank account is. When people look at the numbers and not guess what's going on, they know exactly what's going on. They budget accordingly, and it's no different than when you look at the data with food. You can look at what's actually happening. When you look at it in real life, you're like, oh wow, maybe it's not as great as I thought it was.
So let's go there for a minute. I mean, I've been on the planet for a while, and I never ever recall my doctor saying, well, obviously we need to do a microbiome test here. So what kind of a handshake is there between nutritionist microbiome testing and the medical profession?
Well, we're still trying to figure out how to integrate microbiome testing with everything, what kind of information it's really giving us. The truth is we're actually closer to understanding what an optimal microbiome looks like. So when we get a microbiome test, we can tell you're low on certain species. And if you're low on certain species, we know that you're probably low on, for example, as we talked about in one of these other episodes, low on butyrate. And we know what butyrate does in terms of how it impacts the inflammation and the immune system. So we can trace back your issues to maybe some things that are going on in the microbiome. And that's what they're starting to do now, more institutions, is starting to map out conditions to these microbiome profiles. And now I know at UC San Diego, they're starting to do that more with cancer. One of the things that they're trying to do is specific types of cancer.
Okay. Are any of the, like, you hear about Kaiser and Adventist Health and, different health organizations. Are any health organizations starting to embrace this on a more commercial level, or is it still on the bleeding edge, so to speak, if not the leading edge?
Well, yeah, we're on the bleeding edge and the leading edge. I think one of the things that we're moving towards is being accountable for our own health. You're not going to get a microbiome test from Kaiser and probably not from any other healthcare facility because they don't, I just don't think they know enough about it and how to use it and how to implement it. If we're going to be accountable for our own health, I think it's a very important tool. I think we can learn a lot about it, but that means finding somebody who's can look at it and is qualified to read it and kind of understand how to interpret those kinds of things. Now, there are certain practitioners that have been doing this for a long time. There's certain dietitians that have been doing it. There have been naturopathic doctors that do it. Chiropractors can do it. But looking at these microbiome reports needs some interpretation. It can be overwhelming if you haven't done it before. But that doesn't mean they're not meaningful. So I think it's a very, very good tool and a great guide as to what are the ideal things that we can change to impact our health and help ourselves.
Okay. Well, I think on our next episode, we should go down the microbiome testing rabbit hole. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do that.
We should give that a try, huh? Because I can see, well, I mean, I would say the level of consciousness, throughout the United States, let alone the globe, on microbiome is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, it's still a little slow moving. It's a slow moving movement.
Yes,
like glacial pace at this point.
That's right. And and we are in fact talking about movements, aren't we?
No pun intended.
Very good. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you down the next rabbit hole. Bye-bye.